My ex-husband divorced me over a misunderstanding without letting me explain, but 9 years later he returned expecting a second chance. I, 38, female, got divorced from my husband, Nick, 40, almost 9 years ago. We'd been married for 3 years, and he'd been a good husband, but due to a huge misunderstanding, he left me and then served me with divorce papers a few days later. He didn't even give me a chance to explain, and so he never found out the truth. I was so hurt by the fact that he decided that he wanted to leave so fast that I didn't contest the divorce either and let him go. I used to be a housewife. Then one day, Nick came back home to find my ex-boyfriend, Joe, 38, male, in the house with me, and he turned around and left without a word. The three of us knew each other from college, and Joe and I had dated for just 3 months before I realized I had feelings for Nick. Joe had been visiting to invite me and Nick to his wedding that was going to take place in a few months, and that was it. Nothing weird or suspicious was going to happen. I'd never do that to someone else, but Nick just assumed the worst and left without a word. I tried to call after him and stop him, but he drove away as fast as he could and even blocked me everywhere, so I couldn't get to him and explain what was going on. I didn't even know where he was and spent the next 2 days sobbing and panicking. Joe had also tried to get through to Nick to explain, but even he'd been blocked. I was devastated, but believed that once his anger cooled off, Nick would come back, and I'd explain everything to him so that we could resume our normal lives once more. Unfortunately, that didn't happen, and a few days later, he filed for divorce. I was devastated by that and didn't know what to do. I just needed a chance to explain everything to him, but he didn't think I was worthy of it, and so with a heavy heart, I decided not to fight for my marriage anymore and let him go. I didn't contest the divorce once the proceedings started. I packed my stuff up and moved in with a friend for a while until I got a job and could afford a place of my own. It took a while, but I got my life back on track and didn't give myself any time to sit around and be depressed about what was happening. I was angry about Nick's behavior and will always be. I deserved a second chance, or at least the chance to explain, but even after so many years of being together, he didn't think I deserved it. I felt betrayed and hurt, but I knew I had to look out for myself now, so I got a job and eventually moved into an apartment of my own as well. By then, my divorce had been finalized as well, and even though I didn't get much out of it, I was content. I just wanted to move on with my life, and that's what I was doing. I also attended Joe's wedding a month after my own divorce and had a blast reconnecting with my old friends from college. Nick had skipped it, just as I'd expected, and most people were shocked to learn that Nick and I had parted ways. All of them had expected us to stay together forever, as had I, but life had other plans. Attending Joe's wedding turned out to be the best damn decision I'd ever made, though, because there I met Chris, 40, male, the man I'm currently married to and even have a daughter with. We had a conversation at Joe's wedding, and I did feel sparks instantly, but I held back since I'd just been through a divorce and wanted to work on myself before I rushed into anything else. I wanted a break from men, so I exchanged numbers with him but didn't text for a while. A year later, I was finally in a better place mentally and felt ready to date. As luck would have it, I ran into Chris yet again at a work event since we work in the same field, and I finally agreed to go out on a date with him. 2 years later, we were getting married, and another year in, we even had a daughter who's almost 5 years old now. A lot of time has passed since my divorce with Nick, and I'm a brand new person now, so you can imagine my shock when after all this time, Nick shows up at my doorstep out of the blue. That happened a few days ago, and I'm still reeling from the shock of it all. I don't know how he found me, and neither do I bother to find out later on because I truly couldn't care less. It was the weekend, so my husband and I were both at home with our daughter when the bell rang. I was stunned when I saw Nick standing outside with a bouquet of roses and smiling as if nothing had happened. Before I could even process what was happening, he started talking and explained that a few weeks ago, he'd learned from a friend that Joe was married to a different woman and not me, and he'd finally realized that he'd overreacted back then. He said he wanted to give us a second chance, and so he was back here asking for forgiveness for whatever he'd done. I had no idea what to say to him. I mean, it was ridiculous enough that he divorced me over a misunderstanding all those years back without bothering to find out the truth. But now he was back after 9 whole years of no contact, believing that he could just talk his way back into my life and get a second chance, just like that, when he himself had denied me that very second chance. Fat chance of that happening. He kept talking while I silently stared at him, trying to think of what to do next. I so desperately wanted to shut the door in his face, but that just wouldn't be humiliating enough, so I decided to do something a lot more insulting. I told him to wait right there and went back to the living room, where my husband and my daughter were sitting, waiting for me to come back. I didn't have time to explain, so I just lifted my daughter in my arms and told Chris to follow me to the front door. You can imagine what happened after that. Nick was horrified when he saw me walk towards him with my daughter in my arms and my husband behind me. I smiled at him and told him that he was a tad bit too late to ask for a second chance now and asked him to get out. After a second of silence, he turned around, ran to his car without another word, and drove away. I was really pleased with myself, and I finally felt like I got the closure I'd been looking for all those years ago. Once he was gone, I sat Chris down, and when I told him that it was Nick and told him what he'd said to me, we ended up having a good laugh over it. He was in over his head if he had really believed that I was just going to take him back, no questions asked, after what he'd done to me 9 years ago. I didn't even know why he thought it would be a good idea to just spring this surprise on me without doing his own research first. One look at any of my social media accounts would tell him that I was now married and even had a daughter, but I guess he couldn't get through since I have private accounts everywhere. Even then, he could have asked our old friends and tried to find out what I was up to. Chris believes that he's so self-centered that he must have assumed I would have waited around for him after he'd left, hoping that he'd come back someday, and it sounds like a pretty spot-on assessment of his character, even though Chris has never even had a conversation with Nick. It's been a few days since then, and I thought that he'd leave me alone after what had happened, but this morning, he sent me a message on Facebook from a new account and said that he was incredibly hurt by what I'd done. He genuinely wanted to apologize to me for what he'd done in the past, but I'd made a mockery out of the whole thing. He still feels sorry for what he did, but he also thinks that I owe him an apology as well for trying to humiliate him. AATA for what I did to Nick? Update 1, so I decided not to reply to Nick's message. He really didn't deserve even an ounce of my sympathy or forgiveness, let alone an apology. My husband was right, he definitely just assumed that I'd still be waiting for him and would readily accept him once he was finally ready to come back. He'd always been a self-centered guy, and sadly, I'd overlooked all the red flags before I got married to him. They were always there. He didn't suddenly change overnight, but sadly, I was too blinded by my love for him to see him for what he truly was. Once we got together, he'd always make it very awkward and uncomfortable for me to be around any other guy, even if we were just friends. He wouldn't say it straight to my face, but he'd talk about it later and make a huge deal out of it, so I started avoiding my male friends altogether and would only speak to them in Nick's presence and never without them. He also told me to quit my job and be a housewife because his job required him to spend long hours at the office, so he wanted our house to be for him when he came back. And he said that he didn't trust anyone else to make sure of that other than me. I was honored back then, so I readily quit my well-paying job to be the perfect housewife for him. And despite all that I gave up for him, he didn't even give me a chance to explain my side. I'd always felt that Nick was especially jealous of Joe, given the fact that he was my first boyfriend in college, and I was with him before Nick, so he'd be extra possessive of me when it came to Joe. He never had a reason to, though, since I was always loyal to him and would never even imagine cheating on anyone. But he clearly didn't think that highly of me. After our divorce, I was really torn up, and it took me a long time to pull myself together and give love a second chance. A lot of you guys have been saying that I jump from one relationship into another, and maybe it's true. I don't know. I can't exactly deny it because getting into a relationship just a year after a divorce might be too quick for some people, but I'm glad that I did it. I took that leap of faith, and that's why I have the best husband and a beautiful daughter today, so I'd say that I'm pretty content with how my life has turned out. I'm not going to apologize to Nick, but I guess I do owe him a thanks at the very least, since if he hadn't left me, then I might still have been stuck in an unhappy marriage. Update 2, okay, so I found out a couple more things about Nick. Apparently, the reason he hadn't known anything about my life was because he deleted all his social media, and for the past few years, he'd been living in Seoul for work, so he'd lost touch with his old friends from college as well. He'd moved back just a month ago and had got in touch with a friend of his who wasn't really close with me, so he didn't know about my marriage, but he did know about Joe's, which is all that he told Nick. And that's how he landed up on my doorstep. It's still bizarre that he chose to approach me even after almost a decade of not being in touch, but whatever, I'm over it now. He hasn't texted me after I ignored his message, and I don't think he will either. I also told Joe about what had happened, and even he was shocked at the audacity that he had, showing up without any warning and expecting me to just take him back, and even demanding an apology from me because I decided to insult him the same way he'd insulted me. My daughter did ask me who that man was, but I didn't tell her the truth because she doesn't need to know. I told her he just had the wrong address, and that seemed to pacify her, so she didn't ask about it further. I don't think I'm ever going to tell her unless she somehow finds out on her own, which feels really unlikely. Update 3, Nick texted me again after almost a week of no contact. I guess I'd forgotten to block him, which was kind of silly on my part, but I'm really busy with work, so I'm not beating myself up about it. Coming to the text, he said that he still has a lot of things that he wants to talk about and wants to meet me. He also said that he doesn't mind that I have a husband and a daughter and would still like to give our relationship another shot because he knows that that's what I want as well, deep down. He's insinuating that I'd be down to cheat on my husband with him, basically. Which is just so ironic, because isn't that exactly what he left me for 9 years back? I was speechless when I saw that text because it was so disgusting. I couldn't believe that he even had the audacity to send that text to me and thought that I'd entertain it in any way. I wanted him to leave me alone, and then blocked his number because I sure as hell don't need this man back in my life. It's disgusting the way he can't see beyond himself. I don't understand why he still believes that I have any feelings for him at all apart from hatred. Because I think I made it very clear when he came to visit me that I didn't care for him anymore, and my family is all that matters to me now. He should have just taken the hint and left me alone, instead of showing me how low he can go and what a creep he is. It's making me feel so icky to even speak about this. At least now he's blocked, and whatever disgusting message he decides to send me next, I won't have to see it. I'm trying to erase the memory of the first one from my head as well. To be honest, it's just gross. Update 4, it's pretty ridiculous how some of you guys are accusing me of still being into Nick. No, I'm not into him, but I do hate him. Which I think is pretty freaking natural since I was literally married to this guy before he abandoned me, and of course, I told Chris about that text. I'm not a cheater and never have been, so I definitely would share something like that with my husband. It goes without saying that I love him more than anything in the world, and I wouldn't do any such thing that would put my marriage in danger. The only reason I'd even open the door to Nick in the first place is that I have a bad habit of not checking who's out there, especially when my husband's home, and I'm working on it. But that being said, I would never knowingly let Nick back into my life. I don't want him back in my life either, so it's sickening that people are accusing me of doing that. I hope this clears things up. Update 5, so Nick dropped by again, and I didn't open the door this time without checking who it was first. Luckily, my daughter was out with my husband to meet his parents, and I was supposed to accompany them, but I got caught up with work. When I realized it was Nick standing out there, I told him through the door that he needed to leave and that he wasn't welcome here anymore. I thought I'd made myself pretty clear when I said that, and it meant that he was supposed to leave, but he refused to listen. He told me that he was in town just for a couple more weeks, and then he'd be in another country. I was confused as to why he was telling me this since I didn't really care. But then he said that this would be convenient for us. He said that I didn't need to fight it anymore, and that we could finally get together now. I couldn't believe that he was standing right outside my house and asking me to cheat on my husband. I was appalled and disgusted and immediately said that he had 3 seconds to leave, or else I'd call the police. Once again, he didn't take it seriously and decided to stay, so I ended up calling the police, and they had to take him away. I'm glad my daughter wasn't there to witness it, but I did call my husband up immediately. Chris came back within an hour and made sure I was all right, and I was okay, just a little shaken by what had happened. I don't even know how he'd found out where I lived. The friend who told him about Joe being married to someone else wasn't even close enough to me to know that I was married, let alone know where I lived. So it couldn't have been him. But now I'm feeling weird and uncomfortable in my own home, and I hate it. I'm lucky that he's here only for a few more weeks, and I'm counting on that to make him stay away. It isn't even myself that I'm worried about the most. It's my daughter. I'm not saying that he'd put us in danger, he doesn't seem psycho yet, but I surely wouldn't put it past him. Even today, while I was hiding out in the living room and waiting for the cops to arrive, he was begging me to give him one chance. He thought I was bluffing about the phone call and didn't buy it even though he'd heard me reporting him on the call. I think that's just him being super delusional right now. My husband and I are considering amping up the security, and we're going to speak to his uncle who works in the police and get his advice on what to do next, because this just took a super weird and creepy turn. I don't want to stick around to find out what he does next. Update 6, I think I found out how Nick traced me. I talked to a couple of my college friends, and one of them happened to give out my address to Nick's old friend. She apologized to me several times when I told her what had happened and said that she'd forgotten to ask me first. I'm obviously still pissed about it because her forgetfulness has led to a crapload of problems for me now. I'm taking a break from this woman now because what she's done was immensely stupid. You don't just give out people's addresses without asking them first. I think even second graders would know something as basic as that. I haven't heard from Nick after he was escorted off our property by the police, but we're still considering moving just in case he was lying about being here for only a few more weeks. Chris and I don't want to risk anything, especially since our daughter goes to school nearby, and I'm feeling incredibly paranoid and anxious about how this situation has turned out. So we're still considering a move, and the only thing holding us back, ironically, is our daughter. She loves our home and has been very upset ever since she learned that we might have to leave, so any tips on how to deal with this are welcome. Until then, we're just trying to figure out a way to make this work for us right now without compromising on our safety. Update 7, Nick has moved to Canada, and I've confirmed it with multiple people, so I know he's gone for sure. He's back on social media again, so that's how they all know what he's up to. He had texted me once after I'd called the cops on him, only to tell me that he still believed something could have happened between us that day, but I was just too scared to let myself do anything. He told me that he'd wait for the day I'd realize, just like he did, that I still loved him, and that my husband was just an obstacle in our way and nothing more. He even said that he'd be willing to adopt my daughter to show how devoted he was to me, and sent me his address in Canada so I could reach out to him whenever I felt I was ready. I couldn't believe that people could be this delusional, but at least he was gone. He'd used a new number to text me, so I blocked that as well, and that was it. I no longer have to deal with this bullcrap or worry about him showing up at my house unannounced again. I'm mostly happy about the fact that we didn't have to move because my daughter is so happy that she gets to stay in the home that she loves. As long as she's happy and safe, I'm okay with everything. And now that I know we're not in any danger, I'm not that worried either. We're still keeping the security measures we've taken in place, though, just to be doubly sure. Chris and I also did read the last message that Nick had sent together. We were sitting on the couch drinking wine and watching our daughter play, and it honestly felt ridiculous that even after he'd seen my family, he still believed that I'd want him. I can't imagine how any human being can be so self-involved. I even sent Joe that text, and he had the same reaction as us. I'm still not speaking to my friend who gave him my address, though. What she'd done was very irresponsible, and as a mother herself, she should know better than that. Not only did she put me in a really tough spot, but also my family, and that's something that I just cannot forgive her for. Anyway, my husband and I are planning a vacation to the beach, my daughter's favorite place, in a few weeks so that we can let some steam off, which is much needed since these past couple of weeks were really very stressful for me. And I feel like I've earned a break. I've been very busy with work, as has my husband, and I'm sure this will do us a lot of good. Thank you guys for all the love and support that you guys have been sending us. Much love.